Some of my favorite dolls in the auction is this wonderful tableful that you'll find here. And I'm going to start with a few German, I'm going to end with a few German, and in between I'm going to show you like a transition of history that went on with dolls over, maybe like a 80-year period. So I think that is really important to have. So on my left here, we have two wonderful, and I know everyone is always seeking for these Grodner tall dolls today, and it's so hard to find them, but when you can find them in this original costuming, it is absolutely extraordinary to have. The little one in particular is my favorite. I'm going to show you, well, okay, her little hat wants to come off, but you can still see it that way from the side. Look at that wonderful hat and little basket she's holding in her hand, her little antique basket. This is a precious, precious little doll. And her big sister next to her has a more elegant costume. She has a little girl costume. But there's the more elegant mother costume. Look at them, please, and notice the curls around their face. They're just so wonderful. Each one is different. The painting of the tendrils of the curls around their face is just grand. Now we start with a progression of wooden dolls here, and this little boy is a little bit out of sequence, except, well, I guess I had to put him in this category because he is an early continental wooden doll, and he has the most incredible costume. Come on, you can move back here now and let the little boy take center stage. He is absolutely wonderful. I want to show you something that you might not see. I'm going to pull his front down and look at his throat, please. And what do you see? Do you see the dowel? Because he has the ability to tip his head forward. Excuse me, what am I doing? Why can't I not tip his head forward and back? Because I already had it forward. All right, his head is back, and now it's tipping forward, tipping back, because he has this dowel attachment coming into his neck, which is very, very rare to find. All right, and then he has fully articulated body throughout with the dowel jointing at the shoulders, at the elbows, at the hips, at the knees, and not at the waist. But a wonderful costume with his little toes peeking out. The wooden doll I have next, to me, is like a progression of the fashion doll, the lady doll, made over a period of time in France. And our first one is a very, very important doll. It's an all wooden doll with her original costume. The snood may be of a later time, but not a later time, but may not be original because the costume seems a little too elegant for the snood, but there it is. But look at this doll. She is totally wooden. She has a body that is designed in the manner of the one patented by Crochet about at some later time in 1852, and she is jointed, shoulders, elbows, and the wrists, and at the hips, and at the knees, and at the ankles. And I have actually taken one shoe and sock off because I wanted you to see how shapely her leg was. It's really a beautifully, beautifully carved and detailed doll. And let me show you her costume all the way around. She's really a grand early wooden doll. Very, very regal, dignified face as I'm looking at it now. When I turn it back around to you, what I want you to look at, she has the costume with the padded bosom on the costume. This is all original. And her face, look at the shape of her face. It's very, very distinctive and very aristocratic looking and wonderful, just wonderfully detailed all around. So here we have what you might say is the first wooden-bodied poupée. All wooden, the entire doll is, but all wooden, a very early doll, French, a very wonderful one. But look what happens. At the same time that doll was being made, the whole industry began in the making of wooden mannequins that were used by artists as mannequins for painting their models or as designs for sculpture. That wooden mannequin industry was a very big industry, had nothing to do with dolls. But guess what the doll makers did? They said, hey, that's a good body for a doll. And so we have here one of the rarest dolls of the auction. This is an incredible doll, and I'm going to show you more details because I'm going to lift the skirt, and I hope you can see the body, because it is all wooden, original finish, and it is completely articulated, exactly the way as the one I'm going to show you sitting next to her in just a minute, even to the jointed ankles. All right, jointing of the elbows and the wrist and the shoulders, a very, very distinctive modeling of the face. I'm going to take the hat off. You can see there is a cut pate with a cork at the back, and never a wig, because what was always has been on this doll is this incredible fitted cap. Very, very thick, metallic winding and embroidery designed to absolutely fit onto the back of this head perfectly. You see how it is? That is an extraordinary piece and totally original. In my opinion, this doll was made very, very specifically. It's made by Bru, and it was made for the 1867 Paris Exposition, where he would have had expectation of many international visitors coming, and he would have wanted to appeal to them. There, and get your cape. Is that better? And he would have wanted to appeal to them with a doll of royalty from the regions they were traveling in from. So this was a doll made for that. I do want to tell you, if you see in the catalog, it looks like this is worn down here, and I have had it sent to an expert textile restorer who has restored all the threads at the bottom. So this costume now, as you're seeing it, is absolutely a stunning, stunning, wonderful costume. Very thickly, 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of costuming. Now, next to this doll, whoever buys this doll, by the way, I've only ever seen one model that came close to this. This is the only other one I've ever seen. This is like it's a museum piece. It's that fine. Now, next to her is seated a woman with the body that he actually has. And so we're going to have her stand up, and as you see, she could be posed seated, she could be posed kneeling. It's a wonderful thing about the French wooden-bodied fashions is the potential you have for posing them in so many different ways. Now, some of the features you look for in deciding the wooden bodies, their quality and their level of luxuriousness, is how many articulations do they have. For example, she has the swivel waist, and many of them don't. Many of them have simply the straight torso, one-piece torso, but she does not. She has the swivel waist. She has the jointed wrists. Many of them will not have the jointed wrist. And you see, she does not have the jointed ankles like the black doll we just did. But what she does have is the pivot on the upper legs. See the pivot line right there? Which allows you to turn the leg in other different positions in posing that you might want to achieve. So in judging your wooden-bodied fashions, these are all things that are interesting to look at and to judge. You going to sit down again now? Okay. Now, next to her is the only one, to my knowledge, that was actually deposed in the French courts, and that is the wooden body deposed by Leon Casimir Bru of his fashion doll. Very, very shapely, very slender. Let me lift her arm so you can see just how slender this torso is. A great deal of articulation. The waist is not just a pivot like this one is, straight with a pivot, but there's actually a ball. So it has a lot more potential articulation. It will go a lot more. Jointed ankles, jointed wrists, all of these wonderful extra articulations. This was actually deposed, the body, in 1867. So whenever you find a fashion doll with this body, you can tend to make it that date, with one exception. If it has his face, his smiling face, very, very unique, that was also deposed by Leon Casimir Bru, but it was only deposed in 1872. So here he continued to use his body, clearly, for some period of time, and when his very important signature doll the head that he actually deposed in the French courts, that model. If you have the Bru book by Francois Timer, you will see the actual model that appears in the French courts where he deposed this. Then you can date this doll very precisely at 1872 with the original 1867 body. Very important one. I've saved this wooden-bodied girl for the last because, oh, this is a treasure. So here we have, again, that same wooden body. We have the swivel waist. We have the pivot jointing on the thighs. We have the jointed ankles. We have the jointed hands. And look what else we have. Wow, this is great. We have the mark of La Poupée de Nuremberg, the doll shop of Madame Lavalay Perron, who, all right, she showed this doll in 1867 at the Paris International Exposition. And I'm always thinking about continuity of doll history. And I think it's so important because it's like, well, 100 years later, give or take a few years, we had Barbie introduced in America. Now, I know you're saying, well, why are you comparing Barbie to La Poupée de Nuremberg? Why I'm comparing it is the whole purpose of the doll, of Barbie and this doll. And this doll was marketed as Lily. That was her name the shop gave her. So just like Barbie, she actually had a name, Lily, from the Poupée de Nuremberg. And guess what was important? Not just the doll, but the costumes. The shop specialized in producing extraordinary costumes, accessories, furniture, all of the things that a little girl would play with their doll. Same thing happened with Barbie 100 years later. So doll history does have a continuity, and the more we can see things, to me, in a broad picture, I think, well, I just think it's more fascinating for one thing, and perhaps more important too. I certainly think it is. It's very, very rare to find Lily with this original paper label on here from the shop. So this doll is an absolute, absolute treasure to find. I'm going to move her back here. And then I'm going to show you one more that I love. We have many wonderful fashion dolls in this collection that we're selling, but I have to admit, I get prejudiced. I show you my favorites, but that's okay, I guess. Anyway, this would rank as another one of my favorites. I love her. She has a kid body. She has a kid body, with the exception that she has the bisque arms that go above the elbow. And that allows it to be shown in these wonderful dresses that are shorter cut here and don't have to come all the way down to hide the kid. A very, very beautiful doll. This one is not only has the rare body in a wonderful original costume, but she has a fabulous face. She just has a very, very beautiful, gentle face. And that pale bisque is just those cobalt blue eyes. That's indicative of that early period, that 1867 period. That's just, those blue eyes just bounce off that pale complexion, and that's absolutely wonderful. She's a gem. A favorite among collectors, because the Germans, and we started with the German Grodner tall dolls on the one end of the table, the early wooden ones, but they didn't let go. They wanted to have their own fashion doll. So they produced what we refer to in the collecting field as the twill-bodied Simon and Halbig dolls. Simon and Halbig made the porcelain heads, and these dolls are all on carved wooden bodies with a twill covering, almost like it's glued on. It's permanently attached over the carved wood, and they're able to be articulated exactly the way the French fashions were. Sometimes they will have the bisque hands, like this one will, and this one will. And sometimes they have the bisque lower legs, which this doll does, and I'm not sure, let me check her, I don't remember. And she has the twill-covered lower legs, okay, and feet. So wonderful, wonderful dolls. And they, again, they tend to have they're made about 1865, 1870 period, and they will have the very pale bisque with the cobalt blue eyes as well. So very, very wonderful. So a good example of the progression of fashion dolls through this time period and the different styles that were being made and how they progressed and then eventually began with the Germans and ended with the Germans.